Okay, everyone, we'll get started here. Well, my name is Alex Altamari, and I'm hosting this panel discussion. I'm really excited about this one. When I was assigned this topic, it's something I've been thinking about for a while. You hear about innovation, and so often we talk about the innovations happening in startups, and I personally think it's really underappreciated, the amount of innovation that's happening in the side of funds, venture studios, and accelerators. Quite a bit's changing. I started my first accelerator in 2011, and at the time, I could get away with anything. There was no centralized body of knowledge. The lean startup hadn't even been written. And so kind of whatever I brought people in to say went, and they were the experts, and that's how it went. Investors could get whatever zany terms they wanted. Among ours was non-dilutable 5% equity was my standard thing for our accelerator. And no one knew the wiser. You could not get away with that today. So much has changed. So in an age where startup pitch competitions are now part of middle school curriculum, and so much of the information that people need, this is for real, so much of the information that people used to come to accelerators for is now freely available online. Do these programs still matter? And if so, how? Well, the only constant is change, they say, and joining me today to make sense of all of this are four of the brilliant minds that are leading this change. Just to my left here is Mike Sherbakov, the Veteran Fund, and the Veteran Fund is on a mission to advance America through venture capital. Then we have Ryan Neuter. Cooter. Ryan Cooter. For those of you who are local, you may recognize him as the MD of your local TechStars program here. Brian McMahon, he's the head honcho of Expert Dojo, which has an accelerator and a pre-accelerator program. And Tony Yang, Tony is the head of growth at Mucker Capital and Mucker Lab, which is an early stage VC with an accelerator for founders outside of Silicon Valley. I'll kick this one off. We'll start with you, Brian. As the startup ecosystem has matured and the paths to these resources and knowledge become established, how do you differentiate yourself?
As an accelerator? Well, I mean, I'll start with so we've invested in 300 companies so far over the last 5 years, throughout Africa, throughout India, and a couple of other places. And I see like what we do is a journey of learning as we go through. So at the beginning, I believed like our differentiation was going to be all about growth. And to a certain extent it is. But I think a greater learning that like I've come to is that the accelerator model as it stands today is not as valuable as it was many, many years ago. Like a lot of the things that are taught, to your point, are things that it's not just that they get taught in middle school, it's that they're not necessary. Like teaching people how to grow companies are the things that are really important. So yeah, growth for me is like a huge, huge, huge part of it. But the much bigger question is, like, where do we all sit as accelerators in the future? And like, is there even a requirement for us?
Thanks. Would anyone else like to chime in on that?
I would, if that's cool.
Oh, please.
I think that the underlying assumption in the question is that like education and learning are kind of like one of the core values that you get when you attend an accelerator. And like you mentioned, like a lot of that stuff is freely available online. And the way that we've approached it is to kind of flip that and say like you could learn a lot of things in a lot of places, but what really helps make founders successful is the development of a network and mentors at scale. And so, TechStars has been around since 2007. We've invested in 4,000 companies. We just won one class in San Diego. We're going to do our second class here in San Diego this fall. But the idea for us is that, recognizing that the education component of an accelerator is something that's somewhat commoditized, how do we create a community of people that are there to help? And so when we look at a city like San Diego, our mission is to take the 12 companies that come into the accelerator and surround them with all of the investors. We've got like a bunch of mentors that are here in this room, including this guy sitting next to me. We've got the alumni that are here, and like really the people that support a founder on their journey as they go through and do the things that they learn about from the different places is really, I think, one of the key things that makes ours a little bit different than the others.
And Mike, yours is pretty explicitly niched.
Yeah, so I also think all of them play a very specific role in the ecosystem as well. I mean, I think Founder Institute, it's known as the world's largest pre-seed accelerator. And although we take later stage companies, I know kind of running this SoCal program, our sweet spot is a 0 to 1. really the first-time founder that's coming in there going kind of ideation to MVP. And I love it that when they go through this program, and we're also designed much differently than the other accelerator programs because we don't lead with an investment, right? They're coming in at the 8-week mark. They decide whether or not they want to contribute the 2.5% warrant. That's kind of how the model works. But I love it that we start with a lot of founders. They go through this boot camp, and I was in the Marines, so I love this like idea of a boot camp because it is hard, right? It's 30 hours of company building work every week. And then the ones that finish, in this last cohort that we graduated on Tuesday, we had 18 finish out of a 48 start. And my favorite thing to do is they finish, and then I call Ryan and Misty and say, hey, these are our top founders. Go look at Techstars. I've sent a bunch of deals Brian's way. He's invested in 3 or 4 companies I've sent to him. So I think I love conversations like this because it is very collaborative in nature. And I think if we could continue to just drill down and focus on what we do best, we provide a lot of value for the founders. But cannot overstate what Ryan shared earlier enough that the education piece of it has always been commoditized. You can always go on YouTube. You can go to YC, do their summer startup school for free, launch Accelerator. There's so many things out there, but the network, the community, the structure of it is really what differentiates all of them.
You glossed over really quickly. You have some really unique terms there, taking a warrant and not giving them cash up front. Can you give us a little more about that? I think that's a really interesting financial differentiator, and it perhaps attracts a different type of entrepreneur to your program.
It does, and it's changed over time. So Founder Institute started in 2009. It used to be a 4% warrant, but our goal is not to lock founders into anything. So, for example, they can go all the way up to the 3rd session and request a full refund. So we want to make sure by the time they're 3 weeks in, is this the founder to execute this business? Is this a business model that they really want to go into this with? And then, like I mentioned, at the 8-week mark is this big kind of point of departure where they decide, do I want to be part of this larger ecosystem? At which point they incorporate as a Delaware C Corp. They contribute, sign a 2.5% warrant, and then, if they're kind of top of the class, they can be in the founder select portfolio and get investment and all that down the road. But that is a very unique model, and it's changed from that 4% to the 2.5% just because of what's happening in the startup ecosystem. And there are founders that get there and say, I don't think I need this, and that's great. And then the others say, I really see the value in this. I love having FI in my corner. That's great too. But that's ultimately for the founders to decide. But that's how we model our accelerator.
Alex, can I just pick on something that Mike just said there? It's not whether this is good for us. This is a great model for us. We buy cheap, we give value, and then we get to come in later on and get good prices. To not make money as an accelerator, we have to be idiots, right? So we're gonna make money. That's a period. It's a great model. The bigger thing is over life cycles, things should change. They should evolve. They should get better. And we're 30 years, pretty much with the similar models to what we've had before, all of us, right? And so the question is how many of us are fully auditing what's happening with founders as far as their positioning before they come in and where they go afterwards? And that to me is a much more uncomfortable conversation. And it's nothing about are we good? Look at Y Combinator do. They just get I was gonna say boys and girls, but pretty much boys who go to a school. That's their model. You don't have to have a product. And I'm generalizing. I love what Y Combinator built before, and I think they were great. But they have it really clear. If they get someone who went to Stanford or went to a similar type school, then they know there's a very high probability that their relations are pretty wealthy and that they will have contacts in connections which are going to get them to a high level. And that's great for Y Combinator, probably the most successful venture capitalist in the world. But is it great for founders throughout the country? And I think that's it's not something we'll solve today, but I think it's an amazing conversation to take us to the next level of what an accelerator looks like in 5 years' time.
That's interesting. I want to bounce over to Tony over there because you are, as part of your firm, hands-on working with the founders and guiding them internally. Can you talk a little bit about the types of founders that come to your program and how you've adapted to serve them?
Sure. We also play in the very early stages, so Series A and earlier is usually our first check-in. And we do operate an accelerator program as well, but so I've been with Mucker for about 2 years, and my previous experience has mostly been on the operating side, leading growth teams at early stage startups. And I've worked at incubators before. I've worked at VC-backed startups. I worked at bootstrap startups. And what I've learned in my role at Mucker is we're kind of like personal trainers. So we don't do a boot camp. And we don't have like, a set curriculum. We don't even have a demo day. When we sign a term sheet, they get someone like me. That's why I have a job at Mucker. And I'm like a personal trainer to them where sometimes I'm yelling at them and, urging them on. Sometimes, like I'm teaching them about, hey, this is how you do this exercise. And in that regard, it's almost very bespoke, depending on the founder, their background, their context, their market, what kind of business model. And so, yeah, that's how Mucker operates. And I mean, again, I'm new to the accelerator and VC side, but from what I hear from just being part of the Southern California community, Mucker has a pretty well-known presence, not because of me, but because of our two founding partners, and they really, take pride in rolling up their sleeves and really partnering with the founders that they invested in. Yeah.
Thanks. So another thing I wanted to talk about was, I think the collaborative culture here, because I think there's a lot of beauty in just the amount of diversity in the programs and offerings and structure just right here on this stage, let alone the ecosystem as a whole. And I think we can talk about Techstars. I think I read that there's a 3% acceptance rate. Is that?
Well, it fluctuates, but it's pretty low. It's a competitive program.
And I think one of the misconceptions, especially among founders, is that that's the top 3% are getting in, and that's not necessarily the case. It's often like there are companies that come that are too far along or already have a valuation that's too high that doesn't fit the terms. So it's not necessarily like the top 3 percentile. There may be people that are too late for an accelerator, just not a fit for that specific model, and so they can collaboratively go elsewhere in the ecosystem. Have you guys experienced founders who come through multiple programs or that have already been through programs and then come to you, or that you're routing to others?
So there's times when that's like a good thing, and I think that you can look at it as like, how do the programs that you go through complement each other? The challenge for a founder going through multiple programs is that we're all expensive, right? You're taking, 2.5% in warrants. You're taking, in our case, 6% of common stock. And everybody's got whatever their standard deal is, and so you do that twice, right? Because what we invest is a little bit of money and a lot of love, right? And like love is like hard to put a dollar amount on. And so if you go through multiple programs and you wind up giving away 13, 14, 15% of your company for $250,000 or $300,000, like that's a big give, and it's going to make it harder for your cap table to raise money later. But there are programs where the focuses are very different and complementary, and therefore it might make a lot of sense. So for example, there's a hardware accelerator called Hacks that like takes people out to Shenzhen and teaches them how to build hardware, right? So we love hardware companies that have been through Hacks that then come through Techstars to work on their fundraising and go-to-market plans after they've figured out how to build the thing in China. Because I'm not taking you to China to learn how to build your thing, right? But like they do, and so those are things that are really, really complementary. So the way that I would think about it is, do I have programs that are complementary that are getting me a wide spectrum of the things that my company needs, and what kind of cap table hit am I taking by doing this? If you go through a quality program, like you shouldn't need to do 2, right? It means that you didn't get everything that you needed from the first one, and like then that's something to really think about. What are the things that we need to get moving forward?
And I'll jump in because I agree with 99% of that, except for the last part, which is like I kind of, and we have some of the founders that graduated here in the room. I kind of have a 2 and 2 rule, which is like no more than 2 pitch competitions until you've hit some big milestones. Because I've seen founders just get on this like pitch competition circuit, and it's 10K here, 20K here, but they're not actually building the business. They're just out there pitching the company all the time. And then a 2 accelerator rule, which is, I think, if you're, again, that 0 to 1 stage, I think like we're really good at. And after you finish that, I would recommend, and I tell all the founders in the room, like Techstars and YC are like these incredible programs that are like these large general kind of accelerators, as I would call them. or a more specific dialed-in accelerator that is maybe company or industry specific, and that's when I would send them to what Expert Dojo is doing, or what a space tech accelerator, hardware accelerator, this program. And so I think like if you're going to do one general one and then one kind of specific one, that those two can stack, but for the most part, like Ryan said, you don't want to be giving up all of a sudden up to 15% of the company for a small amount of cash and have your cap table messed up.
You just got to make sure that the company is making real progress, right? Because if you're just looking at a cap table like that, and somebody's looking at your cap table when you're going out for a seed round, they're going to say that's a lot of dilution for you at this stage. And so, like, what you really want to ensure is that like your company is humming by the time you get through that, right? You got to be making money, you got to be having growth, right? Your slope has to be going like hard up into the right, because you're going to need to raise a really, really great round given what a 2 accelerator cap table would look like.
Are not, right? If they get the growth, this is what's super interesting now. Like we took a company in from, I think he went through Techstars as well, but out of Mexico, like a company called eBombo, came in at the start, he nailed, and he was with BDev Ventures, right? And so I don't know if anybody's heard of BDev Ventures in here, but the only thing they know how to do is email. But they're beast at email. Nacho, who started them, he had Blair's Dev, they bootstrapped it to a multi-billion-dollar company, and he's like, I know email. And so we just put him on an email trail. That's all he was working on. He went from like 20K a month up to 290K a month. He doesn't need to raise any money. Like maybe we'll do an A round, but fuck it, maybe we won't do an A round. And I just, the only piece I try and bring to any of these conversations is that when anyone is overly reliant on a conversation, I think accelerators, we should be irrelevant. I think venture capitalists, we should be irrelevant. I think we should be just something that helps fuel someone who is obsessively focused on the customer and obsessively focused on growth. That's all. And then if you come in and there's a certain person or a certain people or a certain program that's valuable to drive that customer growth, it could be contacts. Like you guys do great things within the context that you have. Plug and Play are amazing with having corporations. So if I've got someone who's in the hospitality space, I am definitely sending them over to Saeed and the guys because I know that they'll be able to drive growth. Every single answer to every question should be about growth. And if it is, then an accelerator is a great idea. If it's about raising investment, then you just joined onto a pyramid scheme. Like that's the only thing you did well.
I just want to double click on that because I love when Brian says this. Like the best kinds of founders, honestly, are the ones that I talk to. They're coming for investment from the veteran fund. I say, you actually don't need venture capital. Like just keep growing the business. Like that is my favorite conversation to have, is to say like, yeah, don't take VC, don't go through an accelerator, keep building the business, you've got it. And that's wonderful. Because ultimately we're in the business of like helping founders, supporting founders, and whatever that looks like, whether they go through our programs, get investment from us or not. It benefits the whole ecosystem when the founders have the resources they need around them.
And these guys are the kings of it. Like what you did with Honey was like amazing. There's guys like it's joy to watch. Like you probably didn't even give him advice. You're just saying, I just want to make sure you're not in an accident and you're okay and you're fine.
Keep them alive.
But I think there's a key word that we're talking about here, which is the concept of acceleration, right? And like what that means. And one of the things that we talk about at Techstars is the fact that like we can't take a company that's not going to be successful and make it successful. What we can do is we can take a company that's going to be successful eventually and help make it successful faster, right? Which goes back to like Brian's point around growth. Conversely, like if you accelerate a company that's like going down, like what you're going to wind up doing is killing it faster, right? Like, which in some cases can be really helpful, right? Like, helping a company determine like, hey, this isn't something that we should be spending millions of dollars on building because eventually it's going to die. And so I think that when you think about what makes an accelerator right, it's when you have something that has some slope and your objective is increase the slope, right? It's not we have nothing and we have to figure out what to do with it, right? That's more of an incubator kind of model. And so really like when we go out there and look for companies, what we're looking for is companies that we believe are going to be successful regardless, right? Like we are irrelevant, right? They're going to make it. And what we want to do is we want to help them make it faster.
I love this macro perspective. In so many ways, that's the role of a hands-on incubator accelerator, is to lend macro perspective, both in terms of time and trends. To that extent, when we look at the macro picture from your point of view, not necessarily founders, and you're looking at investment horizons of 7 or 10 years until possible exits, Do you all at all consider things like interest rates or unemployment rates or macroeconomic trends when you're planning for the long term and what you're looking for today? Or is all that kind of irrelevant at the 0 to 1 seed stage?
Totally and completely irrelevant. So here's the thing. How many people are building a company right now? Right? How many people think we have a good economy? How many people think we have a bad economy? Right? It doesn't matter, because the point is, like, your company's not going to do what it is ultimately targeted to do for 7 or 8 years, right? We have multiple election cycles to go through. We're going to have multiple economic cycles. We have unknown world events that are going to unfold over the course of the next 7 or 8 years. And so what is happening right now at these very earliest stages, the way that I like to think about it is, like, we're forging things in fire. And the hotter the fire, like, the stronger the steel. And so when we think about kind of like those macro types of things, it doesn't matter, right? Like, what matters is build a great product, find a customer that loves it, and learn how to sell it to them. And if you can do that over and over and over and over again, it doesn't matter what the unemployment rate is today.
Yeah, I love everything Ryan's sharing, +1, all of those things. And I feel like there is never kind of this perfect environment. So, a lot of founders will say, well, it's a really tough fundraising environment right now. Well, it's also like a really good opportunity to build great teams, because as these rifts were happening and people were getting laid off, they started thinking about, what do I want to do next? And a lot of them wanted to pursue their passions and do a meaningful startup. And so they could come into a startup that historically they wouldn't have taken a position in, because, it's a small cash payment, high equity, whatever that the case is. And then at other times, it's a really good frothy environment, like peak 2021, and then investors are just throwing cash, and diligence is getting done in like less than 24 hours, and deals are just getting done left and right. But then we saw the repercussions of that too. And so, like, it's never a perfect environment, to Ryan's point. Like, whatever's happening economically, geopolitically, like, there are always crazy things. Ultimately, like Ryan said, we're looking for like great founders building something, great businesses that matter.
I'll just add one thing on Mike. Mike is one of my favorite venture capitalists, like, period. And because he's deeply purposeful. And so, like, he doesn't speak about it a lot here, but to his LPs and his founders, he does. Like, they're the veteran fund. So they find veterans who have the ability to do incredible things, but don't have necessary skill sets within areas that they have incredible skill sets. And they have compiled a team from Deepak Chopra's team all the way across the board that can do amazing things with people. And I think I'm going to look at this from a slightly different perspective. I think one of the greatest challenges in startup is mental health. Right, that's where it really is. And so, like, I bridge it from him. You know this better than anybody from the founders that you see coming through. But, like, this is a race against time. And the macro things you got to worry about, your wife, your husband, your kids being able to go to school. Maybe you're older and your kids are like 17, 18, and they're going to leave your nice, cheap, free public school, and they're going to be going to a college, and they're going to want to go to a nice college. The people who are around you in your team, who you have promised all these wonderful things at the beginning because it sounded so awesome on the first day when you got your t-shirt and everything else. And now these people have got the same problems that you are. This is like the brutality that startup. And all these fucking programs on Netflix do like nothing to help this, because it just looks like so rosy and dandy, and it's not. And so I think this is a really real problem, this speed thing. Once you hit 3 years, you're in real trouble. And you're in real trouble up here, because the doubt starts to set in. And if you don't have the trajectory on that magic 200% growth every single year, people around you start to doubt you. And the more they doubt you, the more you doubt yourself. So I think, look, Ryan mentioned the accelerator piece. It is really, really important. The reason that by the way, we stopped doing demo days, period. And we've also stopped doing cohorts, period. Because and it wasn't my decision to stop doing them. I thought we were doing great. Our founders love us. Everybody's given us great feedback. Lots of testimonials, fan tributes. But when we started testing the actual growth from founders who'd gone through a program, we didn't find a shift. And then we realized it was too concentrated in our case. And so we changed everything. So all I just want to say is, like, at the beginning, when someone comes into our program, we say to them, we will not show you to any other investors if you're not amazing. You have to be amazing. If we end up losing money, that's cool, that's one thing. But I'm certainly not going to tell other people to lose money. So here's the rule. Focus on your fucking customer. Don't focus on anything else. Don't have beautiful pitch decks. Don't go to demo days. Customer, 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 customer. Stalk them. Have them take out restraining orders on you. Get a better product.
Don't get a restraining order from a customer.
Okay, my one wasn't a full restraining order. It was just like, please go away from the house. But yeah, like focus on that. Get to 200% growth, and then everybody will want to invest on you. And then you turn this whole toxic relationship thing around the other way. It's time and it's mental health. That's it.
Like just a note on the mental health, and one of the things that's really tough is that most of us who go about the business of building a company, like most of the people who we see on a day-to-day business are not also building a company, right? Like think about your friends and your neighbors and your kids' friends' parents. Most of them have a job, and they go and they get a paycheck every 2 weeks, and it's wonderful for them, and everything's great, right? You have decided to do something different, and it is lonely. And so we do a class. We do a 13-week class. We've got 12 companies in it, and I think one of the biggest values that comes out of it is that every day for 13 weeks, the 12 companies get together in a really great space on campus at San Diego State University, and they work together on similar problems, and they help each other. And they talk about the things that are working, and they talk about the things that are struggles, and they talk about, you know, the challenge that they have with their relationships, and all of those types of things that the people who have the day-to-day job don't get, right? They won't understand the same way that another founder will. And I think one of the things that when we think about network and we think about community and we think about mental health, like I think that one of the things that is most helpful for a founder is surround yourself with like-minded people who understand what you're doing and what you're going through. And it increases your odds of success, and it increases your odds of happiness.
As long as they're not losing, right? Like surround yourself with win. Like I'm just saying, for me, I'm Irish. I'm Irish rules, right? So for me, I'm just like, look, you got to go out there and win with your customer. Like that's it. I'm not saying don't be nice to people. Like I do know. I've read about that stuff, and it's good. Like, but I'm just like go out there and like beat the crap out of the ground all day, because
100%.
Once you hit that period, you're damned no matter what happens.
What I'm saying is that the people who you surround yourself with, some of them are going to win, some of them are going to lose. Right? And if your company doesn't make it, I still love you, right? Like you're still great, like as a person. And so like what I really, Brian's like, next. But like look, the reality of it is like if you look around this room, like of all the people that are starting companies in here, some of you are going to be wildly successful, right? You're going to buy the boat, you're going to take the trip, you're going to do all of those things. Some of you aren't going to make it. Right? Like, well, hopefully you're going to make it. But the company that you're working on right now, some of you, those companies aren't going to make it. And that's so hard to deal with, right? Because our identity gets wrapped up in the companies that we're starting, and like we become our business. And when our business dies, a little bit of us dies inside. And like it's inevitable. We take 12 companies in a TechStars class. Not all of them will be successful. But I think that what's important is that as you're on the path to discovering whether you're one of the ones that are or aren't, that you have a network of people that are there to support you along that journey. And I think that's important for every founder along every step of their entrepreneurial road.
Well, and one of the things TechStars does especially well is the alumni network, which I know isn't broadcast up front, but is very robust, and you're kind of in it for life. I'm curious, now that things have accelerators, incubators, this whole lean startup movement, it's been around for over a decade. Are you guys working with serial founders? What happens to the ones who don't make it? And do you welcome them back into the programs? Do you see them joining others that came through your program that are the successful ones? Like once you do have that community established and you are up and running, where is that trend heading?
Oh yeah. I'll just provide a brief comment. Startups are a marathon, right? So, and for a venture, you know, I mean, we're not going to see returns until years down the line, right? And so, while yes, we have seen, you know, successful founders or moderately successful founders, or founders that seem successful to the public, but it was more of just a, you know, fire sale type of exit. You know, we've seen founders come back and start their second startup, and we welcome them. Most of them. There's some that, you know, don't take any of our advice and just decide to do their own thing. And we're like, all right, well, we can't help you anyway. You didn't listen to us the first time. So yeah, we do see some repeat founders. But yeah, I think just the time horizon is so long that, I mean, we have founders that went through, previously with their first startup or first few, YC or Techstars or, any other accelerator. And this time around, they're trying us. So yeah, we have seen a few. And by the way, we also have a few founders from, companies we've invested in that are doing some work for us, whether they're scouts or other growth advisors like myself. I'm a full-time growth advisor. I have people on my team that were previously or even current Mucker founders. And so we thought, hey, they know what they're doing in terms of growth. Let's get them to help some of our other portfolio companies.
I'll just jump in quickly and say, I mentioned it earlier, but I just think as long as there are resources for founders, we all win. And again, I say all the time, I'm accelerator agnostic, I'm program agnostic, as long as it's the right fit for the founder, even if it's a non-program that they go through. So to answer the question directly, we on average, every cohort have, let's say 5 out of the 50, 10% or so, that have gone through the program before, but somewhere before that 8-week mark, a lot of times they have family stuff come up. A lot of times they realize the business model isn't the one that they wanted to pursue. They realize they're passionate about something else. So we always welcome them back, to your point. But then also, a lot of people don't know this, but in addition to being the world's largest company creator, Founder Institute's also the world's largest fund creator. There's a program called VC Lab. If anyone is an aspiring VC, highly recommend it. It's a free program. But a lot of times folks go through this program and they realize, actually, I want to be on the VC side. Maybe they've angel invested for a little while. And so again, they may get directed to another program or Techstars or Expert Dojo or Mucker, wherever they end up, you kind of find your people along the way. And as long as I think us as program managers, VCs, managing directors, welcome these folks with open arms, I think the whole community wins. I'm in this very collaborative nature. But that's just, we're pre-seed and seed. So I think it's, once you get in the later stages, you start seeing a lot of sharper elbows.
I love San Diego because it's a great collaborative place, right? The folks here, as you walk around just, TechCon today, you're going to see people running up to each other and giving each other hugs and saying how good it is to see you. And that's because San Diego is just an incredibly welcoming place for everybody to come and build. And that's why I think it's one of the best places on the planet to build a company.
Here, here.
I'm not just being contrarian for the sake of it, okay? I'm not. I do. I love startup and I love founders and I love investors and I do. And I love this space and I wouldn't do anything else. But because I just look for the fault or the evil in everything. I try and find things that can help our family. I'm always trying to say what's wrong. And so I find that how lean startup has been interpreted is a fundamental evil. And I find minimum viable product an even worse evil. It is a terrible, awful developer's definition of just shit being given to customers who deserve more.
That's
right?
not viable, though.
But what about lovable product? What about simple, complete, transformative? What about that? Wouldn't that be nice? If we treated those first customers like they weren't pieces of crap that we stand on, how about that? And what about if we actually tried to build companies that actually made a huge difference? So that is the one, I'll finish this on this point. The one thing that terrifies me about what I see about the technology and everything that's coming out is that the people who are building really beautiful, incredible things get looked over. They just don't get a look in because it doesn't fit into part of the system. And the junk that comes out that can be built quickly, disguised very well, and ramped up, spending hundreds of millions of dollars of just bullshit Facebook ads, tend to make great venture-backable companies. So I just think there's a lot of what we do that as leaders in the community, and I mean all of us, we can relook at and I think build a far better system, which isn't just a copy and paste to what San Francisco did 25 years ago.
Well, thank you all. I'm getting the sign that we're running out of time, but I think this sounds, as much as it feels like a bad place to pause, it sounds like we've accomplished what we set out to do, which is not end up in therapy, but show just the immense variety of offerings and unique approaches and philosophies in this now mature startup ecosystem where every founder can probably find the resources they uniquely are looking for, the parenting philosophies they're looking for, and the fit that they're looking for. So thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure.